Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Build an Iconic Life. I'm Chris Whitehead, the host of the show. Stay tuned. Jay Nixon is going to blow your minds, everybody.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.
Welcome to Build an Iconic Life podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whitehead, and this podcast is dedicated to help you build a life with zero regrets by focusing on how you have everything you need to stand up, stand out, and live life on your terms. Let's dive right in. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show today and share with everybody. How are you, sir?
I am doing great, brother. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, dude. I tell you what, you've written a book.
Yeah, two books.
You've got some coaching set out for people. You're a man on a mission. Why don't you give everybody, just at the beginning here, what is it that you are in the process of accomplishing, sir?
Yeah, my big goal is to help people live, to steal your word, an iconic life. I want people to grasp that they have the potential inside of them. They were born for greatness. And I think a lot of times what I do is, my world is kind of weight loss transformation. And so what I get people to see is that they're not overweight or they're not struggling with weight because of food per se. Like that's always a secondary condition of it. And weight loss is always a side effect of getting yourself in alignment when you start living a purpose-driven, alignment-based, iconic level life. And so I use fitness and nutrition to get people into my world. And then I start uncovering the real reasons that they're struggling. And so the first book I wrote, The Overweight Mind, is really all the psychological reasons why people struggle. And I just put a weight loss spin on it. My second book's called The Purpose of Pain. And that's really my personal story of how I turned a lot of perceived tragedy at the time into a purpose-driven life. And based on both of those two philosophies and principles, I feel like the luckiest cat on the planet. And I did what a lot of people do, is I chased a lot of things early that weren't really for me to chase. I was programmed to chase them by society and family and things like that. And then when I started my own entrepreneurial journey, that's kind of when the whole thing changed for me. Now I have a fitness studio. I have my own supplement line. I have a coaching business I coach clients all over the world. I've got a podcast with over 230 episodes. I just get to do cool shit every day, man. And I'm jazzed about it.
Dude, the more important thing to me than what you do, and by the way, that's a hell of a list.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's why you do it.
Yeah.
And so this second book, talking about turning a few perceived tragedies into triumphs, bro, what are you willing to share about that on the podcast?
Yeah.
I want everybody to read your book, but I want to hear about this a little bit.
Absolutely. Everything, man. It's I say perceived tragedies because at the time, my father got killed when I was 5 years old. And at that time, when you're 5, you have zero basis of any kind of life experience to register that with. There's nothing to compare that to. And then as I got older, but before I was 17 years old, two of my other fatherly figures, his dad, and then a gentleman named Lonnie, who was kind of like one of my earliest mentors when I was growing up in high school, both passed away. Lonnie, I got to, on Christmas Day, when I was 17 years old, he had a heart attack and I just happened to be at his house and I gave him CPR and kept him alive until the paramedics showed up. And I say I got to, and I always say that in retrospect, because if I wouldn't have been there, his family would have had to done that, right? And even at 17, a lot for me to handle. And then fast forward to the last perceived tragedy, my best friend committed suicide when I was 25. And that's what kind of triggered me into, so from the time I was 5 to 25, I lived a life of, I would call it chaos. I was angry. I was pissed. I was scared. I was full of fear and doubt and all these things. And I didn't know how to express my emotions. I was just a ball of chaos, for lack of a better term. And when my best friend committed suicide at 25, I made a decision to get control of my life, because I was living a life based on events that had happened to me and perceiving that everything was going to happen to me with that same level of BS, if you will. And I said, that doesn't have to be that way. I started the personal development journey. I started reading books. And this was back when personal development wasn't even a thing. Like now you can fall down and land on a coach now. This was back whenever, like, I mean, I was listening to like CDs and like, trying to, find books. Amazon didn't even exist. You couldn't go get an Amazon book. Like, so it was a different world. And that's kind of how I started on that journey. And I say perceived tragedy because people always say, when I tell that story, they're like, Jay, I'm so sorry. And my initial statement is I'm not, because yes, would I've loved to have a dad? 100%. But because I didn't, I am who I am today, and I get to do what I get to do today. And if all those events hadn't happened to me, I don't know what I'd be doing, man, but it wouldn't be this. I don't feel like it would be this purposeful life of passion, and I wouldn't have such a burning desire to help other people figure out their path, their course, and their iconic life.
There's a saying out there about boiling water, a potato, and an egg.
Yeah.
One of them gets soft and one of them gets hard. And, as you were speaking, like everybody, I start going in my mind about the things that I've gone through. And I hear this overriding message of you're either going to take the shit that's happening to you and become a victim from it. And no judgment if you do. The whole world is full of people that, it turns into overeating, it turns into drinking, it turns into sexual, issues, it turns into murder. I mean, whatever, right?
Yeah.
I don't judge you if you turn into a victim. I just want you to know that there's another way to perceive all that shit you've gone through. And for the strongest of strong people, what I see them always do is they turn it into purpose. They find a reason. And and part of how that resonates with me so much is I remember watching a documentary, I don't know, probably a decade or two ago. No, decade ago. And it was all of the people that had gone to Auschwitz. They went to New York and they found all the Jewish people that were still alive, and they were all like 98 years old or something, right? But they asked them, so many people died. How did you stay alive? And they said, every single one of these people said, we found a purpose behind the pain. Even if that purpose today was just to make sure that this little kid over here got a little scrap of bread.
Yeah.
So purpose didn't necessarily mean major, definite life purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose meant they found something that they could transmute that energy into something else. And part of why I esteem people that do that, I've also worked very hard in that direction, because it's tough. It's tough to fight against your mind. It's tough to fight against programming that's in your head that's unconscious, that you don't even know, that your immediate response is this, which is actually a reaction, not a response. And then once we start learning to that personal development, once we start going through the process, we start catching ourselves tripping into doing the wrong thing. And we just go, wait, I'm not going to keep beating me in the face for doing the wrong thing. I'm actually grateful that I just saw me do the wrong thing. And I'm going to choose maybe tomorrow to do one step in the right direction. And I bet that's exactly how your decision to become a personal development guru, coach, whatever you want to call it, it started with one step at a time. And then you look back 15 years later and you're like, holy shit, I think I'm just going to keep going on this walk for a while. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it was just awareness. I became aware of, I always tell people, like, Jay, when did life change for you? And two things, right? It's like when I started becoming aware and when I started believing my own bullshit, when I stopped believing my own bullshit, because I'd created this story based on the events. And like you said, nobody ever questioned that. Like if I told my story, people were like, holy shit, dude, of course you're a little pissed off. Of course you're angry. Of course you're not really good at relationships. Everybody you love pretty much dies. Like, I'm not even sure I want to love you because you might be a problem. So I mean, nobody in my life was willing to stand up and say, hey man, you got to stop this bullshit. Right. And so it wasn't until I made the decision to stop believing my own bullshit and say, like, listen, man, that's not. And the catalyst was my friend Chuck committing suicide. And I said, okay, I'm on a path right now that leads me to nowhere. And and that transitions in a lot of different fashions. Like I was destructive in my personal life, my professional life, everywhere. It all bled into everything else. You know what I mean? And so I said, listen, I know. And listen, I was the little kid. I believed that I was going to play shortstop for the Yankees or quarterback for the Cowboys, or I was going to be the point guard for some basketball team. I believed I was born to be somebody as a little kid. And as I grew up, and I kind of like, I stifled that a little bit as I got older and older and older. And it wasn't until that moment when I decided to make that shift is like, okay, if that little dude went through all that shit and he still believed that he was going to be somebody, like it's there. You just got to start to get aware of the nonsense that you're believing and the actions that you're taking and start making better decisions. And it didn't epiphanally change overnight. I didn't read one book and was like, oh, now I am who I am today. I just turned 48. That was when I was 25. I mean, do the math. I mean, that's almost 25 years that I've been on this walk, if you will. And I'm here to tell you this. You said this beautifully. It's like, if you've decided to nest in the victim role right now, cool. But just understand that there's a different way. And the other way, I can tell you after being on that side of the fence for 25 years, this side is so much better. It's so much more awesome. There's so many cool things happening over here that just start taking steps and start, doing little things that are going to get you out of that victim mentality.
For those of us that are communally based, which is every human on earth, hint, hint, the most beautiful thing that I found, so I'm going to share it with everyone, is when you first start to work on yourself, your self-image starts to change and starts to grow, and you no longer tolerate codependent relationships. You no longer tolerate using other people because you start looking at your own integrity, and you no longer tolerate being used by people. And so what ends up happening is your alignment becomes much stronger than whatever assignment you have, whatever you do for work. And you start hanging around other people that help that perpetual machine of exactly what Jay's talking about now. It's called the So Much Better Life. Yeah. See, we're doing really well right now. We have 4 companies. We own this big ass house. We have cars. We have stuff. We have money. We have children that are healthy and all. And you know what? Any one of those fucking things can change tomorrow. And I have to start all over again if I'm even lucky enough to be alive. Because this is what happened to you when your friend passed away. It's what happened to you when your dad passed away. Because it happened to me too. Right around the age of 30, I started losing people in my life that I cared about. And it happened really quickly. And I've never stopped thinking about death since. Like every single day, I think about my own mortality. But what I realized is I get to be the author of how the rest of this story goes. And then I started seeing all the people that were surrounding me. And I was like, the energy that they put off, they're actually sucking energy out of everything they go toward. And I keep giving it and then going home and drinking or overeating, or I fight with my girlfriend, or I fight with my wife, or da-da-da-da-da. When we start making these changes, Jay, we start going, I like you and I want to hang out with you and I want to support you. And I want my whole friend group to be this kind of people. Why? Yeah. It makes life more fun.
Yeah.
We don't get around and talk about all the crap that happened to us. We might share it with one another, but then we say, and so what are you going to do about that? How can I help you with that? Yeah. And I can trust that you don't just take the information and then go tell the same story to somebody else in the victim talk and do nothing with it. You're going to do something with that, which means we're growing a forest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just saying, I talk about that in both of my books because it's so, I believe it's one of the core principles of why and how people become successful. I call it your circle of success versus your circle of chaos. Most people have a circle of chaos. Very few people have a circle of success. Your circle of chaos will be massive, right? You're going to think you have 37 friends, and I can assure you that you don't. Your circle of success will be very small. I always tell people, like my clients, because most of my clients will say, oh, well, how do I deal with this person and that person and this person? I say, it's a process of elimination, right? It's like auditing your inputs. You're going to receive an input. You're either going to implement the information and or the human that you receive that input from, or you're going to delete it. And if you keep getting negative input, that means that person, place, or thing needs to be deleted and not implemented. And I always hold up my cell phone and I'm saying, this thing never rings and somebody on the other end is ready to breathe negativity into my life. And like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no one calls this phone that has negativity to spread into my life. If this phone rings, it's from somebody who's in my circle of success. And that's taken time to craft and create that. There's been a lot of elimination and no strike at those people. They're not bad humans by any means. That's the next thing. People are always like, well, what if it's my so-and-so and my brother or my sister or my aunt or my best friend since 6th grade? And I'm like, sometimes they got to go. And that sounds harsh. And it's not that you have to send them a Dear John letter and say, hey, I can never speak to you again in my, ever. It's just that you're not going to allow them to influence the life that you decide that you want to live. So that's really an important thing, is like, you have to make the decision and define what kind of life that you choose to live, and everything that doesn't breed fire and strength into that life, you've got to eliminate.
That's the tough part of personal development that I've seen people struggle with.
Yeah.
And those of us that are empathetic, we want to love on the world, man. We want to give it a big hug. And, we want to love on people the way that we didn't get the love. That's part of what comes out of you. But the truth is, not everybody wants it yet.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that if we're only given a certain amount of energy, life energy, are we going to invest that in places that multiply that energy? Or are we going to invest that in places that just take it and evaporate it and it never happens again? And I believe success leaves clues. The truth is, and you and I both know this, as you go down the personal development mindset journey, it's not that it gets easier, it's that you get better, and you're simply willing to be courageous and kind. Like you said, you don't have to do the Dear John letter.
No.
But you're courageous enough to say, I will not tolerate this in my life anymore. And I know you're probably not going to understand it if I tell it to you. So I'm just not going to tell it to you. I'm just going to go get busy living my life. And I'm not asking for your fucking permission. Okay?
Yeah. And you can still, and listen, you can still love those people. I had a conversation with a group of people not too long ago, and I said, listen, I don't have a relationship with my brother because of the differentiation and growth versus stagnation of kind of how we both handled the death of my father. But I love him immensely. And somebody was like, well, how is that possible, Jay? How can you love somebody that you don't have a relationship with? And I said, well, no, I can love him without allowing him to have an influence into my world, right? The two things, they're not mutually exclusive. Like you can have both, right? I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean I haven't spoke to him in probably over 10 years. Love him immensely. If the phone rang and he called, I'd pick it up like that.
Right.
Right. But there's a differentiation, right? He doesn't get to have an active role into my world. And that's just how it has to be at this stage.
When my son Spencer was 2 years old, I live in New Hampshire now, but at the time we were in a place called Waynesboro, Virginia. It was about 20 minutes outside of where I went to college. We had a nice little 4,000 square foot home, pool, view of the mountains. And I would take Spencer to Smoothie King, right? And right beside Smoothie King, there was a video store where you could buy whatever video games. And every kid his age, because you and I are the same age, every kid his age, they're playing video games by the time they're 0.5 years old. And he has a smoothie in his hand, and he's standing at the door of the video store, and there's this dad yelling at his son. And Spencer had never heard, like, we didn't yell at him. Don't yell at him. Never yelled at him.
Right.
He's 18 years old right now. And I remember Spencer holding this thing and just staring at that dad yelling at his son. And I thought, as a dad myself, okay, I don't really want this memory to be something that Spencer has. I don't want him to even remember it. Yeah. So I can either go in there and jerk Spencer really quick and say, don't pay attention to that, and take him into the video store. But I don't know how this happened. God kind of tapped me on the head and said, hey, all I want you to do is gently slide in between where they're yelling and where Spencer's eyes are. Get down on his level, Chris, and look him square in the eyes. And just say, hey, son, I love you. You want to go into the video store now? Because, Jay, I had the same experience as you did. These traumatic experiences were made worse by the jarring of a exclamation point put on the end of it. And I know that I don't perceive them the same way now as that reality of them when I was 5, 7, 18, whatever. Yeah. It's just different now. But if I could, at the end of this thing, gently just change my son's attention, no trauma, no drama. He's not going to see any more yelling. I'm basically taking cyanide and pouring water into it. And the reason that I tell that story is the same reason that we're talking. Dude, there's so many alpha meathead males out there that are beating on their chest that are saying, do personal development, do one more, small steps here, blah, 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 blah. And what they're doing is they're hating on the enemy.
Right.
Everybody, there is no enemy. It's just people being people, and you do not have to put an exclamation point on the end of it to define who you are. If you know what the truth is, you can just very gently, with love in your eyes, get someone's attention and say, there's a better way over here if you want to come with me. Yeah. And that's what I respect about what you're doing, because you're taking the time not to shame, blame, or tell people that they shouldn't be overweight. You're saying if you don't want to be, there's some fundamental things that you should know because I've researched them. And number two, here's what's cool. You're going to lose the weight as you go through this process anyway, because eventually you're going to love yourself so much that you're going to find harmony with what you do.
Totally.
That's friggin' iconic, bro.
Yeah.
That is mastery. And that's why you're having so much success, because it's just the truth.
Yeah, speaking on the enemy part, like you said, there's no such thing. And if we do believe that there is, then the enemy is actually ourselves, right? Like we're the one that we're battling against.
It's the dragon eating its own tail.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the big thing, right? It's like I think anyone who is in that cycle is like, that's the awareness piece that we talked about a while ago. It's like, once you become aware, well, I was the only problem I had in my life. I perceived I had a bunch of problems. I had one problem, and it was me and the way I thought and the way I perceived life based on the programming that I had done to myself, that I had allowed society to do to me, right? To tell me, hey, it's Jay. Of course you can be a victim. You can be, right? So we get programmed in those things. And it wasn't until I started unprogramming myself that, I got to a place of, differentiations in my career, my personal life, my financial life, everything just changed immensely. And so it's all connected, right? It's all synergistic. There's no, I'm just going to work on this and letting everything else go to shit. It's like everything is intertwined. You know what I mean?
Well, and what it sounds like you did is you took the governor off, or you took the parachute off the back of the car that's trying to go 1,000 miles an hour, and you just said, go. And so the energy that you're putting in there now is building something that actually will bear interest on it as it goes. And that's what success is. And people even try to do that with successful versus non-successful people. It's like, oh, you're not working hard enough. I'm here to say that there is a certain level of work that some people call hard to become successful, but that's not really the truth. Right. The truth is just working in a singular direction consistently long enough so that it starts to bear fruit.
Yeah. I've been doing this for a long. I started working out, lifting weights when I was in the 6th grade. And so people will ask me all the time, like, hey, how long do you spend in the gym? And I'm like, that's the wrong question. Like the question is, how long have you been going to the gym? Right. Because now, at 48, I can get away with going to the gym for 15 minutes if I want to, right? Because I've built a consistent foundation over the course of the last umpteen years. If you haven't started, if you're just starting, and I started when I was 11, well, you're gonna have to do some different things than I did. So, it is the consistency is the most important piece of the entire puzzle. And I've evolved and changed from 11 to 48. It didn't just miraculously come that way. And that's from a physical sense, but then also from a psychological sense and everything. I mean, once my psychology changed, like my entire life changed, my whole perspective on everything changed.
I'm right there with you, man. And everybody asks me, oh, you've had so much success, you must be so proud of yourself, blah, 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 blah. Jay, the only thing I'm proud about is I never quit.
Yeah.
That's what I'm proud about. I could have quit, and I just thank you, God, for giving me a meathead
Yeah.
that I just won't quit on what down in my gut tells me is truth.
Yeah,
And I bet you feel the same way.
Unbelievably stubborn. You know, I did something at a live event about a month ago, and I had people define certain terms. Before the event, I said, here's your pre-work. I want you to define these terms, your definition, not Webster's, not whatever. You just write down, and they were simple. They were like success, failure, health, money, love, just basic terms that we all use on a daily basis. You wouldn't believe the dichotomy of definitions that came around the room. And we were defining failure, and somebody in the audience said, well, Jay, what's your definition of failure? And I said, well, you're going to hate this, but I actually don't even have one. and the whole room postured up and said, well, you made us define failure. We all wrote these things down, and then you made us all tell you. And I said, well, here's the reason I don't. It's because I don't give any energy to it. The only way I can fail is if I quit. And I can promise you all today that I'll never quit. And so therefore I can't fail. And so if I can't do something, if I can't fail, why on earth would I have a definition for it? Why on earth would I give it any energy at all? And they were like, shit, I wish I would have thought of that.
Dude, it's like brilliant.
Yeah, but it's so true, right? We have all these definitions about things that we don't, if there's no value for me in it, I don't even need to define it. It's not even in my vocabulary.
You know, and you know this, I spend so much time on social media telling stories.
Yeah.
Yes, it's marketing, everyone, whether you know it is or not.
Hey, listen, you're a good storyteller, though, so I enjoy reading your stuff.
I appreciate it. But the goal is to scratch the itch of helping other people while I help myself define what you're talking about. We have this beautiful opportunity to be conscious right now, or not if you choose to be, but we have this one chance that we don't know when it's going to end, to think the thoughts that we do, to manifest the reality that we want to see. And we can either be the kinds of people that allow life to happen to us, or we can start to see that life is happening for us. And instead of pushing on the pull door or trying to push a rope, we simply start doing what works to get very consistent results. Success is not something that is meant for the few. Success is meant for anybody, and you can define what that is for you. We just want to be the cheerleaders because you have no idea how much it encourages we that have chosen to never quit when we see someone else that will not quit too.
Oh,
and bro, I'm watching you do it. I've got goosebumps through my sweater with you talking about what you're doing and how you're doing it, because that is iconic to me. You have chosen to define who you are, to stand on that spot, on that rock. And I've told people this all the time, whether I agree with you or disagree with you has no bearing on whether or not I see it or not. I'm proud to know that there is another soul on earth that decided to transmute the negative things that happened to them into having a purpose behind them, and then never forgetting the lesson and thinking that it's valuable enough to share with other people. Because you've impacted thousands of people's lives, and I would imagine your goal is to impact millions upon millions before this thing's over.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not quitting. Like, I don't know. It's whenever you get in this place of just a purpose-driven life, like, you don't know what else you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any other options. My options are done. Like, luckily I found this, and it's the only thing that I know how to do. People are like, what are you going to do when you retire? I'm like, I don't know how. I wouldn't even know how to retire. I'm just going to keep.
How do I stop talking to people about things that I care about?
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. And that's
what retire?
Yeah, that's what I get to do. People are like, sometimes if I meet somebody, the first thing I say, they say, Jay, what do you do? Or who are you? Or, some question like that. And I said, if I had to give you a business card, it would just say guy who gives a shit. I just really care about other people, and I want them to win. And it's like you said, we get to make a decision. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times we're making decisions based on somebody else's rules or somebody else's definitions. I want you to create a life that you get to live on your terms and your definitions, not mine, not Chris's, not your parents for sure, not society, not anything. Like, you define what life means to you, and then you do everything you can to live that life.
And everybody, you have some supporters in us. Jay,
totally.
Thank you so much for being here, bro. If people wanted to reach out to you, What's the best way they can find you? They can learn about your supplement company.
Yeah.
They can learn about your books, but more importantly, they can connect with you. What's the best way?
Yeah, you can just go to my website. My business is called Thrive Forever Fit. So it's the word thrive, the word forever, and the word fit. Or you can just Google Jay Nixon and you'll find my YouTube and all my jazz. I'm pretty easy to find.
Bro, I'd love to have you on again sometime, dive a little
Thank you.
deeper into some of these conversations.
Love it, man.
It's been such a pleasure getting to know you, bro.
It was a fast 30 minutes.
It was past 30 minutes.
Cheers, man. I appreciate you.
We'll see y'all in the trenches, everybody. Take care.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
Hey, friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to catch future casts. If you really enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it so others can benefit from it as well. I'll see you in the trenches.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.